People who grew up in poverty and are now rich, what's the biggest shock about rich people that you learned? The freedom it provides. Freedom to not spend hours mowing their lawn, laundry, cleaning their own car, grocery shopping. Freedom to eat healthy. Freedom to prioritize exercise, endless lists. Those of us that don't enjoy this freedom sacrifice our few hours on earth performing these mundane tasks. Yes, the sweet, sweet freedom of paying someone else to battle the rogue sock monster in the laundry abyss. True luxury, no lie. Story 2. That rich people can afford to do things that save them money. Better health insurance and car insurance with lower deductibles. Higher quality food that keeps them healthy. Gym membership prevents future health incidences. Prompt car maintenance to avoid big repair costs down the line. Higher education for a better paying job, the list goes on and on. Story 3. I'm not rich by any stretch of the imagination, and it might not be a shock to others, but going on vacation. When I was a kid, we just stayed home every summer, never went anywhere, stayed generally within the same 200-kilometer radius of where I live. We didn't have a lot of money. Now I go on vacation twice a year, and I've been all over the world. 17-year-old me would be in awe. Story 4. Read Limbo by Alfred Lambrano. It's a sociological look about straddlers, people who grew up poor, blue-collar, and then made it to the upper middle class or the upper class. I'm one of them. It talks about the strengths and weaknesses these people have. If you own a business or organization, you want these people working for you because they're always hungry for more and seeking out new ideas and opportunity but concerned about taking on too much risks. It also talks about how these folks have a lot of issues. Being a straddler, you might find it difficult to go back to your blue-collar roots, finding it hard to relate to family and childhood friends, because education, money, and experience have evolved your worldview, while at the same time, you'll never really fit into the new upper-class world you've worked your way into. Minor things like you didn't grow up golfing, so you can't get in with the richer folks socially as easily, to bigger things like code-switching accents or vocabulary, to suffering from constant imposter syndrome. Story 5. More like lower middle class to upper middle class, but it blew my mind when I realized how many people I know now frequently pay to have their house cleaned, and grew up thinking that the cleaners being over was just a routine part of life. I was probably in my late 20s for the first time I ever paid someone to clean. Same with things like moving, painting, house maintenance, stuff like that. I'm at a place where it makes more sense to save my time and pay for many of those things. But anytime I talk to my mom and mention it, she assumes it's something I'm doing myself, because it never would have occurred to her to spend money on that, and for most of her life, she couldn't afford it. It's a pretty interesting divide just between the strata within the middle class. Story 6. Money makes money. We're buying some land that has a waterfall. We could build our dream house, Airbnb it, and it could potentially pay for the house within 10 years. The money to buy the land came from diversifying our assets, our financial portfolio. We would take on some risk to build this house, getting another mortgage. But theoretically, if everything works, we wouldn't have spent anything, but would get a free dream house and more. For what? For almost nothing. If we screw up and lose our investment, burn the entire property down or whatnot, it'd still be fine. It wouldn't be life-ending, but it'd be unfortunate, but survivable. When I was growing up, my mom would make ramen for a special family meal, and she would use 3 ramen packets for a family of 4. She would add rice to the ramen broth after when we were still hungry. Once we used something, it would disappear, so we were frugal. A financial disaster meant starving, losing your home, etc. I spent my $10 for the week wrong. I can't afford lunch anymore and got to starve for a week. I could have never imagined that once you get enough money, it just makes more money. Einstein said that compound interest is the world's 8th wonder. He who understands it, earns it. He who doesn't, pays it. You know when you're playing The Sims and in the beginning you have to be careful about every dollar you spend, but after a certain point, when you're rich enough, it doesn't matter anymore. It's just numbers. That's what it's like for the most part. And you know how the game gets boring after you've bought everything in the game? The trick to getting a rich life is that there will always be more expensive things that you can aspire to. Like I felt pretty good until I watched Owning Manhattan and was like, that Bad Bunny penthouse sure looks nice. But the key is to appreciate the things that money can't buy, literally life, health, people, relationships, our planet, etc. Gratitude is a muscle, use it or lose it. Story 7. While not truly wealthy, I still view everything in terms of minimum wage value. A can of cola, that's like 1/5 of an hour's work. No way I'm buying that. Eating out? No way am I paying 4 hours of labor just to eat. Ignoring the fact that I earn many times over minimum wage, I still can't bring myself to spend money on things like that. What's funny is that people who never experience poverty don't seem to value money as much. I had a coworker go out to lunch at work. He grew up in a home with a private swimming pool. He ordered a meal at the restaurant, took one bite, and said, "Nah, I'm not hungry," then paid the bill and we left. It blew my mind. Story 8. The richer you are, the more free stuff you get. Your account balances are so big that maintenance and overdraft fees are waived, and you occasionally get large bonuses simply for transferring some of your money from one account to another. Companies that are eager to do business with you provide you with free samples or even trips to their exotic locales. Story 9. Okay, so I got a job as a software engineer. I didn't win the lottery or marry into old money or anything, but the first few years of working in a well-paid career, I felt like I was going insane. It's hard to relate to your new coworkers when your hobbies are watching TV shows with friends and writing songs on a guitar your mentor gave you, and then their hobbies are international travel, credit card hacking, and investing. My former boss once mentioned offhand that she pays all the travel costs for her family, and then her husband pays her his half once a year, and they had traveled a lot that year, and he was sort of shocked to find out that his half of that year was $15,000, which he did have available to pay her. At that time, I'd been in tech for 6 months and was very proud that I'd scraped together a $2,000 emergency fund for the first time in my life. Also, you get so much stuff for free as soon as you don't need it. My job paid for my monthly bus pass, my health insurance, even my morning coffee. That first job, they had a coffee shop in the lobby with 2 full-time baristas that was totally free. Honestly, some of the best espresso of my life, and when I had no money, I was a coffee nerd. 2 of my coworkers bought coffee at the coffee shop down the street every day anyway because they liked that coffee shop a little better. It was infuriating to be given all these perks that would have been life-changing the second I was also paid enough to afford them without it being a struggle. Something worth noting, if you work in a well-paid field like that, watch out for the people transitioning out of poverty. They were massively underpaying me, and I technically knew that, but it was still so much more than I had ever made in my life that I couldn't bring myself to believe the actual numbers for entry-level tech jobs. If it weren't for the unofficial women in tech group who did a salary sharing spreadsheet and helped a ton of people advocate for raises and eventually got salary bands implemented, I would have never been brave enough to ask for what I was worth, and since raises are percentages that can impact your pay for the rest of your career, I try to pay it forward now. Story 10. Shock is a strong word, but I didn't realize the social safety net rich people have. Growing up poor, we lived absolutely paycheck to paycheck. More accurately, we lived borrowing against future paychecks, and it felt like we were never far from homelessness. One job loss, one prolonged serious illness, and we would have not been able to pay the rent and would have been evicted. All of my parents, his family, and friends were similarly struggling, so if we needed help, they would not have had much to give. Now, as an adult with more money than my parents could have imagined having, we not only have substantial personal savings, but we also know so many people who could help us if things got bad. If worse came to worse, we have multiple friends with vacation properties that they barely use that we could move into. Not that I think it will ever come to that, but life is dramatically different, never having to worry financially about a job loss, illness, unexpected car expense, etc. Story 11. I see very few people actually answering OP's question. Probably because people who grew up in poverty and are rich don't spend a lot of time posting on Reddit or advertising their wealth online. However, I've been around 2 people in my life that started out as lower middle class, not necessarily in poverty, and ended up rich. They were both very driven, smart, and had an inexhaustible supply of energy that they dedicated to the ongoing growth and success of their businesses. In general, they are on or working from the time they get up until they go to bed, always entertaining clients, potential clients, or doing something else related to the growth of their company. I have no desire to sacrifice myself to a company in that way. I prefer to have more time to spend with my family and friends. Story 12. How boring it is to be wealthy. After a while, everything becomes dull. 3-star restaurants, elite travel, parties, etc. It's amazing at first because everything you dreamed about as a kid comes close to true. But over time, the parties are the same. Travel just means you're bored but in a new location. And that new plate with morals and asparagus foam isn't even worth a second glance. It's so easy for your life to lose purpose. There is no work relying on you, no family you need to be the breadwinner for, no house to fix up, no lawn to take care of. You have no goals. You simply exist. Some turn to golf, some to substances, some to the arts, some to politics, some to philanthropy. Anything to fill the days and not think about the void. This isn't a complaint, nor should you respond with a "let me have all your money, lol," because I get it. Of course, it is better to be rich and bored. What a luxury, right? But it was surprising to me. Wait, I kind of don't get this at all because, if I were rich, I wouldn't be bored ever again, right? Story 13. When we had our first children, twins, we were poor. We went through the process and had two healthy boys. A few years later, I had a stable job with medical insurance when we had our third child. Everything was nicer. They didn't push us out of the hospital so fast. All the basic care was the same. But I was shocked at how much better we were treated with insurance. Story 14. They are not usually smart. The ones I have interacted with and dated could not tell you much about science, philosophy, arts than your average person. Their intellect is limited to career knowledge. Most don't have too many passions in life outside of maintaining their lifestyle, as in acquiring wealth and hoarding it. This includes spending less and finding good deals. Of the families that I have interacted with, many of the children never developed the same drive that their parents had that led to their success. Story 15. I'm not rich, but my husband and I make well over $500,000 a year. That sounds like a lot until you learn that we live in Mountain View, California. He works at Stanford and I work for a social media company here. We do well, we have no kids, and we have saved a lot of our income. I grew up super poor on and off until I was like a late teen. Like my father hunted for our protein and my grandma mended my brother's hand-me-downs for me. My husband grew up reasonably in the upper middle class, maybe the bottom level of the wealthy. The biggest things I've learned? One, that the desire to be rich one day is itself a religion. A kind of religion. It's a dogma that we say prayers to. There are rituals around it. There's this almost spiritual belief in the I'll be rich one day afterlife of imagining one's post-scarcity paradise. In reality, once you get rid of all the things that drive you by occupying much of your time and energy, you are left with your own demons. I'm a gay guy from one of the poorest parts of Ohio and from a right-wing Pentecostal family. Under normal circumstances, my needy kids, a job, a wife, and the stuff of life would keep my mind occupied. Freed of that, I'd have time to unpack an incredibly painful childhood, which has not really been the paradise I hoped for. Until I arrived at this place, this myth about one day I'll be rich and happy when I have X amount of savings was a lie. It was a myth. It was like a religion that kept me working and kept driving me forward. One day, I reached the promised land and discovered that it's mostly sophistry. Happiness is the pursuit of happiness. It is in belonging to others and in having a purpose to those we love. 2, miserable people are mostly miserable no matter what. Happy people tend to be happy no matter what. There are exceptions. Below a certain amount of income, the circumstances of life drain and destroy you. If you earn enough to buy back all that suffering, waiting in lines, crappy healthcare, clipping coupons, worrying about rent, what you're left with is a space where you can thrive. People born to be miserable schmucks will be miserable no matter what. People who would be happy but can't because of poverty may probably thrive. And those who are happy will just be happy no matter what happens. 3, rich people, really rich people, really are different. Since I'm surrounded by SV wealth and have a few friends with 8 and 9-digit worth, they are just different. I have a friend in the 8-digit range. She is utterly obsessed with her earthiness. I'm just like everybody else. So we were strolling down the street in San Francisco after lunch. She went on and on and on about how she's not disconnected from reality. Then in one moment, she took a call from her husband. Okay, well, just call Bob and have him charter us a jet. We can get to Las Vegas in like an hour. I was like that Indian football coach meme staring at her. Excuse me, Marsha. That statement was not a just like everybody else statement. Next to nobody else ever says those words. Well, charter a jet when getting to Vegas in under 4 hours becomes so inconvenient that they don't want to drive. 4, no matter how rich you are out of touch with someone struggling at a less entitled position as you. I'm not rich, but the luxuries to which I've become accustomed are hard for me to live without. My husband works at a hospital and we have great tech worker insurance. So when we go to the hospital, we just go in and any doctor will see us. We fly mostly business class and anything other than that is quite literally painful. Maybe you can't afford those things, but if, say, you live in the US and have a house, food, clothing, and not much else, there's someone far worse off than you somewhere on earth. They're suffering, you're not. And the hardest thing about our reality is that there is only so much of our time and energy any one of us can spend thinking about it. And 5, the greatest joy you get from having money is the freedom from worry that it buys and the ability to do really great, kind things for your loved ones. It's nice being able to afford doing stuff for our friends and family. It's nice being able to not have to do so many of life's super annoying things. It's nice getting time away to go on vacation. Buying stuff? Not worth it for me. It's more about all the time I get with my husband. Story 16. I'm not rich, but I spent the first half of my life working class poor, the second half destitute poor, and now I am comfortably middle class. Wow, that is wild to think. Many upper middle class and up folks genuinely believe they are working class or middle class or just getting by. I've had people getting 50K kitchen renos done by interior designers tell me they're poor, or people with brand new cars they bought in cash, or people who travel to Europe for weeks at a time, several times a year. They will say things like, well, I bought the car in cash, but I had to save for several years to afford it, not realizing that a working class family could try and save forever. They aren't ever going to be able to afford a $75,000 vehicle in cash. Or, well, the kitchen before was so disgusting and was falling apart, it had to be upgraded. Not realizing that for actual poor or working class people, they just keep the disgusting kitchen. I used to argue with these people when I was poor because I would get so angry at how clueless they were. Now I still get annoyed, but I've learned to just smile and nod politely and let them live in their woe is me world. Story 17. I went from my family being on welfare as a child, not having enough money for food when times were hard, to now, I make 7 figures next year and close to that this year. Most of my money I make in real estate. A couple of things I've noticed. It's absurdly easy to make money when you have money. All rich people are essentially using a cheat code. They don't necessarily work harder, they don't necessarily work smarter, but it's just way easier to make money. The system is truly rigged in 10,000 different ways. The only hard thing is making your first million. Time is the ultimate wealth. Nothing is more expensive than being poor. Do whatever you have to in order to make enough money to be secure and comfortable and have investments. In the long run, it is so worth it. Work a second job, go back to school, whatever you have to do. Save enough money for down payment and buy a house. Just work like a smart demon for 5 years and buy that house with an extra unit you can rent out. Things will just get so much easier. Life is super long and it will be worth it, I promise. Alright, so being rich is like playing life on easy mode with infinite money cheat codes? Suddenly my struggles make a lot more sense. Story 18. Your poor friends will kind of resent you for it. Never ever tell anybody how much money you have. It will only bring sadness and misery. Also, the desire to become rich can be a kind of mental illness that is the result of being raised in poverty. I'm not super rich. My net worth puts me in the top 10%. I have enough to retire and live the rest of my life in comfort if I chose to stop working. But I still feel this constant anxiety that I don't have enough or something is going to happen and I will lose it all and be homeless. I think what we are experiencing in the US today is that the ultra-wealthy billionaires have become mentally ill. I mean, if someone is worth $1 billion, they could spend $100,000 a day for 30 years and still pass away with money. But all they can think about is, how can I get $2 billion? These mental patients would rather destroy democracy than have to pay taxes. It is madness what they will destroy to do it. Story 19. While I wouldn't call us rich, my husband and I are now both high earners, so we definitely have way more money than I did growing up. My mom was always good at making do, and I didn't realize we had no money until I was in high school. Some of her ways of grocery shopping on a strict budget and making things when you can instead of buying them are still things I do. But we now get to do things like go on nice vacations. When our kids were younger, we could pay for all of their various activities instead of limiting them to just 1 or 2. Buy them new gear instead of used. Now we pay for their college tuition. The best part is the peace of mind. We don't stress about emergency maintenance to our house or what if the car breaks down. We pay people to do yard work and have time and money for our own hobbies. We both still work full-time, but at jobs that give a lot of paid vacation time. I'm very grateful that I have been able to spend more time with my kids and with far less stress than my mom did. But my mom is definitely a superwoman, and a lot of why I have what I have is because of how I grew up and how she raised me. And if you're learning a thing or two from these stories so far, please remember to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 20. There's absolutely no limit to being rich, and there is rich, and then there is wealthy. Flying private on your own plane is rich. Flying private on your own plane from your own FBO to your other FBO in another hemisphere because the winter is getting you down is wealthy. Rich people still work out of a perceived or real need, especially because they see other more rich people and they think they're not rich enough. Wealthy people don't work unless they want to. Story 21. I grew up qualifying for free lunch in school, so below the poverty line. My dad did everything from fixing the cars, changing oil, building the house, buying everything used, growing us his own food, etc. At a certain income level, it makes less sense to do anything other than work. Rich people make so much more than everyone else, they just pay people to do everything. Story 22. I grew up middle class but had some quite lean years as a young man. Then, through little fault of my own, I came into some money. The thing that really amazed me was how once you have money, particularly well-planned investment money, you can really take advantage of the tax system's many loopholes and what seems like gifts to the idle/investment classes. When I was an hourly worker, it seemed like a big part of my income went to various withholding taxes I never saw and had little or no chance of getting back. But once I had a few bucks coming in and a good tax accountant to see me through the incredibly labyrinth US tax regulations and laws, I was dumbfounded by what a relatively easy ride I could get. I get it that we want to encourage investment. I started my own business, my customers seemed satisfied, and I made some decent money. But I have to say that when I contrasted my tax situation with my prior life as a quote unquote working man, I could not get over how much easier it was to make money when I already had money, a business, and perhaps crucially, a good tax accountant. The current system is not fair. It was created by people who already have wealth, by people who really want those wealthy people to keep giving them money and keep getting favorable tax policy in return. I come from a conservative libertarian background, but look around. The people with wealth and power use that wealth and power to hang on to wealth and power. Here's the thing, I'm a businessman, and I know all too well that a consumer economy cannot thrive or even survive if all the money is redirected into the pockets of the already wealthy. We need truly fair, equitable, progressive taxation that shifts more burdens from the employed class to the investing elites in order to provide a more sustainable economy that benefits all hardworking citizens, not just the elites who pay for bespoke tax policies designed to enhance and contain wealth to the upper classes. Story 23. Penniless immigrant as a child, multimillionaire in my 40s. Nothing about it has shocked me. Having more free time to pursue interests and the freedom to do what I want when I want was expected. I do notice that I am much more mindful of how I treat the people I meet, that life has sort of slowed down for me to a degree that I can be more introspective and put more effort into being a nicer person, as opposed to running around head down trying to make my way out of poverty in my 20s. Does that make any sense at all? Story 24. How much easier it is. Everything is easier. So much stress is reduced. You are never one paycheck away from being homeless. Something breaks, replace it. Need something, get it. Car always starts, heat always runs, bill comes and I pay it. Kid needs something for school, I get it. Hungry, eat, anywhere. Someone else cleans my house, fixes my plumbing, mows my lawn, and works on the appliances if needed. Everything is easier. I didn't recognize how much mental capacity these things take and how much stress it causes until I had enough money that they went away. Story 25. I'm not rich, and yes, I grew up poor as heck, but the biggest thing I learned being around them is how little they care for those around them. Unless you have the same amount of money as them, you are literally a subspecies to them. You are there to serve them, and you are lucky to be around them. There are the odd good couple, Bill and Melinda Gates, come to mind, but the vast majority wouldn't care if you pass away. As long as you can be replaced and your passing away doesn't inconvenience them. I worked high-end security for a bunch of years, too many years. Story 26. I went from throwing mulch bags to president of the North American division of a global publicly traded company in about 10 years. I didn't grow up poor by definition. There are and were far poorer in the US. I make a lot by most measures now. I'm 10 to 20 years younger than the other division managers and 20 plus younger than the board. I'm the only person that didn't come from generational wealth. I went to my CEO's home, which is on the top 2 floors of an apartment building about 200 yards away from the palace where the king lives. The rest make general mention of their home in Cannes, stable, or visiting their cousin's private island in the Mediterranean. I used to be intimidated and like they knew things I didn't. I'm sure they know things and have experiences I didn't. I'm the same. I have experiences and knowledge they don't. However, I didn't grow up with the crutch that they did. It makes even the smartest of them easy to predict. When a person assumes they're smarter than everyone, you can play into their hubris and get the upper hand, which is why I am where I am. I've never seen such ego and hubris before in my entire life. They're not smarter, they're not more talented, they're definitely not more capable. They just have the tools that have passed down through their family for generations, not just tangible assets. There is no smartest room you ascend up into. There's just a much higher chance for people with a crutch to get that high up. It has more to do with your ability to predict and influence the future. They use their background as their input data. It's just as narrow as a kid who never left his town in Mississippi. Story 27. I'm not rich, but definitely better off than I used to be. The biggest change for me is just being able to buy whatever I want whenever I want it. I don't have to save up a few dollars per paycheck, then decide if I still want the thing when I get the money. This is also a bad thing because I just keep buying crap I don't need because I can afford it. Also, taking trips and vacations. Growing up, my only vacations were to visit my two cousins 2 states away, and I would have to meticulously pack for it because if I forgot something, I just have to go without. Now I go on a trip at least once a year, and I'm not as anxious about forgetting something because I can just get a new toothbrush or phone charger or whatever if I need one. Story 28. It didn't happen to me, but my brother is making quite a hefty amount of money, and he's totally unrelatable now. His existence is just so much different than mine. He doesn't do anything himself. He has paid maids, cleaners, hires couriers, drivers, etc. He barely works because when you get to that point, nobody cares. He rolls in, does 2 to 3 hours a week, and he's usually good at doing whatever else he wants. He also just completely avoids his family. I think I talk to him like once every 2 or 3 months since he doesn't answer phones or texts from any of us. My theory is because we all grew up poor, he thinks we're going to ask him for his money, so he just cut us out entirely. Story 29. I fall into the opposite category. I grew up upper middle class, but now live as a member of the working poor in the US as a middle-aged adult. My waspy parents don't believe in handouts, so I've never been the recipient of their constant financial support, even though they absolutely could have managed that. I've always worked, but not in a field that provides a lot of income, much to their probable dismay. I was also a single mother for 9 years, which was also to their dismay. Now that I've settled down and found a husband, they're so keenly interested in my husband's career and professional growth, whereas I'm still just bungling a career working with animals. It's a point of shame. I have the cultural capital of someone with former access to the trappings of the upper middle class, education, decent teeth, style, knowledge of fine art and music, cuisine, travel, etc. But I now live in a world where this means nothing, if not total snobbishness. However, this has made me understand that the American dream is a closed casket. The bootstraps are a lie. Story 30. Having gone from zero taxable income in 2012 to over $1 million in 2022, perhaps I can offer some insight. What's most surprising is how differently everyone treats me now. My family thought I was a lost cause because I had made bad grades and didn't like church. Now they say they're all so proud of me and always knew I'd make it. Ha! Some friends ask for money pretty regularly. I give them side work or contract jobs, but they're bad at working and have no interest in doing well. You'd like to think those around you are just your friends, and I do have those, but typically they're doing well themselves. This thread mentions how much time rich people save, but for me, I only pay people to clean my house so that I can get work more. The time I spend in the office pays for the cleaners. So it's not like I'm laid up chilling while people clean my house. I'm just working more, and I work a lot. Another thing is that I spent more money on dumb stuff when I was broke. Lol. I still have this stupid zombie axe that was like $70, and I justified it by thinking I was being prepared. Stupid. I could have gotten a better axe from a hardware store for half the price. Now I'm hyper aware of every dollar, even though I shouldn't really be. I invest in the market. I have all types of side hustles in addition to my company. And I'm constantly reading and listening to podcasts about the market, geopolitical events, and learning what drives sectors. I'm deeply interested in creating generational wealth because all of my deep-rooted childhood fears stem from poverty. Lastly, I'll say that having screw you money shows you who you really are. I honestly thought I was more materialistic, and I know I'm not a nice person, but I am absolutely a good dude. I'm solid. I have integrity and strong beliefs that aren't about money. I just love to work and earn a lot. It's fun to me. I don't know if that's the answer you wanted, but that's been my experience. Story 31. We are comfortably middle class, but I have spent time with both sides. The wealthy often don't realize how being poor makes life so difficult. It's not as simple as just getting a job. It's when there isn't enough money for food, but your car brakes are failing and you need your car to get to work, so where do you spend then? The wealthy are used to being able to solve many problems with money. Additionally, the wealthy can circumvent a lot of issues because of money. In the above example, the wealthy will have the funds to regularly maintain their car so the brakes don't become a problem. I also think the wealthy assume that every person has had the same opportunities that they have had, which I find very untrue. It's easy to tell a homeless person to get a job when you've always had access to one. Maybe dad made some calls. Access to better education, mental health care, a stable upbringing, etc. Conversely, I think the poor resent the rich for not understanding the real struggle of being poor and how it creates stress in every part of your life. The constant worrying about finances, trying to make money last, the crushing blows of minor emergencies like car repairs, or even something like being asked to be in a friend's wedding and having to say no because you know you can't afford the money or time off to help with the parties, buy the attire, etc. I remember when we were quite poor, a young couple with young kids who had poured all our money into making a new business work. On our only date night in the 3 years for our anniversary, we were gifted a gift card to a restaurant. While inside, someone stole my husband's keys from his pocket while we were standing at the crowded bar, unlocked our car in the parking lot, and stole all our kids' Christmas gifts that were in the trunk, our stroller, and both kids' car seats. I bawled my eyes out because I knew we couldn't afford even new car seats, much less the Christmas gifts that I had been picking up year-round on sale the few times my kids weren't with me. A wealthy colleague of mine just said, well, at least it was just all replaceable stuff. I know he meant it in a look on the bright side way, but I remember thinking he was just so out of touch. Story 32. I grew up living on struggle meals, sometimes went without eating to make sure my siblings had food, while my parents preferred to focus on getting spiked, wasted, etc. I made my first million a few years ago, and each year after that, I've made even more money. At this point, I'm definitely getting close to the point where I could retire early if I wanted. The biggest shock is just how much is available to them for free or at lower cost, despite them not actually needing things to be cheaper. My health insurance plan, USA, is cheaper now than it was even when Obamacare was in place to try and make things affordable, and it's a far better plan too. At one point, I was paying almost $400 a month to have full coverage on a car. Now, $78 a month. Industry events, trade shows, top-level networking events will have these extravagant goodie bags with each one being a couple of $1,000 in value. If there's food and or drinks, similar stuff is going on. Just a room full of wealthy people picking at prime rib, bluefin tuna, salmon, etc. Crap is wasteful as heck, but nobody cares. There's absolutely a point where you have enough money to pay for most anything, but some companies will just throw crap at you and say, here you go, use this, have this, I insist. Despite it being entirely unnecessary. It's freaking weird. Story 33. Not wealthy enough to quit working yet, but my salary and savings and investments are far greater than I ever imagined. Growing up without a lot of money, we always talked about how much things cost. Cheap, getting a good deal, buying the least expensive of an item, being unreasonably frugal, etc. The biggest thing I learned is that the least expensive item is not always the best value. Spending a little more for higher quality is better than just wasting money on garbage. The second is how money is a good way to save time and hassles. For example, taking my car to the mechanic for maintenance and repairs, even though I'm capable of doing it, allows me to have free time on the weekend to do what I want. Ditto for home repairs, just hire somebody. My father was incredibly hardworking and frugal, annoyingly so. I remember he and I went on a hunting trip together. I opened a bag of potato chips and started eating. He said, those have to last all week, meaning I was eating too much. I said, well, just go to town and buy more. His head exploded thinking we could just buy more of what we want as opposed to rationing the chips all week. Story 34. There is a wild difference between people who are born rich and people who come into it from work or windfall later in life. The hereditary wealthy call them a nouveau rich, the idea being that they come from low origins so they don't appreciate the finer things like art and culture. If you never wanted for something, then nothing has value. If you never had to forego lunch at school all week so you would have money on the weekend, you can't appreciate the value of paper money at all. If you never had to hold down a job to pay rent and bills, you can't appreciate what a job means to people. This I'm very serious about. I've had jobs where I had to scream internally because it took all my might not to say the thing that would get me fired. Sometimes it was a grave injustice, but often it was just an overbearing schmuck of a boss. Very common in all minimum wage jobs and quite a few that pay better actually. Ever worked in sales? An example of not understanding value, I was in the day room of an extremely wealthy client. His family owns a vast number of properties and companies. They are all the second generation of a family that started off with a very small business that just happened to be doing the right thing at the right place at the right time. Guy has an immaculate Gibson guitar mounted over the fireplace. Looks just like a famous person's famous guitar. I ask about it. The owner doesn't play guitar. Isn't into the artist who looks like it belongs to. Yes, that is the original, worth over 6 figures. It looks nice up there, doesn't it? Ugh. Story 35. I wouldn't say I'm rich as such, but I have good UK middle-class wage, and a lot of the people I know now grew up upper middle class. My family is solidly working class, and the fact I earn $50K is an unreal amount of money to them. The main difference I've noticed between us is education and what was seen as an appropriate aspiration for them. I went to a pretty crap state school, and because I was pretty clever, did all right before dropping out of uni. The fact I work in an IT consultancy for the government and earn what I do is a massive success for me. My sister don't earn anything like that much, and my parents never did. My friend grew up very well and went to a fancy private school in Northampton. He's been a secondary school teacher for about 15 years now and earns a little bit more than me, but considers himself a massive failure because his mates from school are senior armed forces types or high up in the civil service. Because my school considered 5A to C's a success, getting a good job in an office was the best I could imagine. He went to a school that trained cabinet ministers. Our views of what we could and deserve to do with our lives are miles apart. It's fair to say I'm a lot happier than he is. Story 36. I learned once you obtain a certain level of wealth, you can establish a situation where your money generates more money than you may actually need, and with enough capital, this requires neither business ownership nor property ownership to do. Dividends, market return rate with occasional trimming, simply routinely selling covered calls with profitable positions and other methods can each allow the ultra-wealthy to make money without having to work in the traditional sense. When people say their family has money, this is often what they're referring to. Story 37. Honestly, how kind most folks are in higher income brackets. Not poverty, but lower middle class growing up, and at least in my hometown, there were a lot of crabs in a bucket mentality. Lots of people trying to bring others down, and lots of jealousy and resentment at people who were able to change their lot in life. My family scoffed at me when I told them I wanted to go to college and were mocked by my own father at my ambitions. A lot of defensiveness for why I wanted to get out of my small town and do something meaningful with my life. Have like 2 friends from my upbringing I keep in touch with. But now, everyone is so self-assured and actively happy about others' success. People try to lift others up instead of tear them down. It's an abundance mentality rather than a scarcity mindset. Just because you have doesn't mean that I also can't have. It's so refreshing and I'm so much happier with my social circles and life now. Story 38. Definitely grew up poor and I'm now elderly and comfortable. I would not define myself as rich. I do live in a neighborhood with rich people though. My observations. Rich people have just as many mental illnesses as poor people. Rich people are often nice but not kind. Rich people pretend to care but are often either oblivious or apathetic about the plight of the poor. Everyone is different, but I believe my observations to be true. Story 39. I wouldn't say I'm rich, but I have more than I grew up with. I'm shocked at how many ways there are to legally avoid paying taxes when you have more money. If you ever feel like the system is rigged against poor people, you ain't wrong. It's rigged. And if you are a poor person voting Republican, you are being hoodwinked. They are, in fact, dropping taxes, but they aren't your taxes. And if any of these stories got to you, here's more for you YouTube things. You're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.